45-year-old. Three, two, one. Betsy was a 45-year-old mother of four from Milwaukee. Her oldest was a junior at UCLA, and her youngest was 12. She recently bought her first laptop so that she could Skype with her daughter and send emails to her parents living in Illinois. It actually was so that she wouldn't have to fight with her kids for computer time. Betsy would not consider herself to be technically savvy, but over the years she had come to appreciate various new technologies. Her digital camera allows her to more easily take family photos. Her new laptop allows her to do office work from her backyard. Even Facebook, which just a year ago she thought of as a pointless waste of time, had become an enjoyable way to catch up with distant relatives and high school friends. This morning, Betsy woke up, made coffee, and was rating her emails before work. Her brother Ben from La Crosse had sent her an email with some family photos, as he usually does after their early summer kayak trip. Betsy downloads the attached photos and unzips the contents, as she just recently learned to do. Only this time she did not receive any photos. Almost immediately, her computer starts displaying dozens of unwanted pop-ups. It starts to get sluggish, and finally it crashes with a blue screen of death. Later that day, Betsy finds out at work that several of her clients have received very embarrassing emails from her. A week later, Betsy finds out from her computer technician that she just lost 3 years of family photos and a project she has been working on for the last month. The story might be a hyperbole, but it happens every day. This week, we are dedicating this show to the Betsy's of the world. All of you out there who have lost time, money, and precious memories because of malicious pieces of software, commonly referred to as a computer virus. We are going to give a narrative, the story of viruses, why people create them. We are going to explain what exactly a virus is so that you might better recognize one. We will give some advice so hopefully you can prevent them, and we will point out some resources so that you will be able to tackle a virus removal yourself. This week on TechQuest, understanding the world of computer viruses.
Welcome to TechQuest on Riverwest Radio, featuring your hosts Bjorn and AM. This week, we're going to be talking about computer viruses. Stay tuned. Hello, everybody. Welcome to TechQuest. We're gonna be talking about computer viruses, and we're gonna start with a brief history of the computer virus. We'd also like your input. You can email us at Riverwest, or it's rwtechquest@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook, and I'm gonna get a phone number for you to call us in if you would like to do that.
Yeah, so this week, viruses, the most dreaded thing that computer users have to deal with. They're emotionally and financially debilitating for somebody that's first getting on computers. And they're the number one question that everybody always asks about. When AM and I first were trying to put together this show, we received 9 out of 10 people that were giving us feedback were like, you guys should do a show about computer viruses. And so it's our third week. We wanted to make sure that we were really prepared to do this because this is a huge topic. There's an entire industry developed around understanding what computer viruses are. And before we continue any further, I would just like to make the distinction. When most people are talking about computer viruses, they're not really talking about viruses. They're talking about computer malware. Malware, basically, it means bad software, unwanted software, whereas a computer virus is something very specific. It's a program that replicates itself. It attaches to something you want, and it replicates through a network or through a system.
So there's good viruses?
There are good viruses out there.
Oh.
Yeah. And so that kind of like, we're talking about something that's very nebulous here. Like the idea of malware, bad software. Well, bad software might mean something completely different to me than it does to you, AM.
Yeah. One thing that I've learned is there's many different types of viruses, and depends on what. Nothing on the computers happens by itself, but they're all human created. So you have different viruses for different purposes.
At this point in time, they're all computer created. It's just a matter of time.
Human created.
Human created. It's just a matter of time with artificial intelligence before we start having computer viruses that are computer created.
We're doomed.
We are doomed. But hopefully in the next hour, we can alleviate a little bit of that doom.
Yes. Okay.
So, computer viruses, they've actually been around a long, long time. Longer than the internet, longer than the personal computer, a very, very long time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. First theory on what led to the computer virus was written in 1949. A professor by the name of John von Neumann wrote a lecture series where he actually traveled the country and talked about the theory and organization of complicated automata software. And this was software that operated completely onto itself. And, that idea was more science fiction back then. Like it was just an idea that possibly at one point in time, we may have programs that can execute themselves.
Nice. So yeah, that was 1949. Then we have a little timeline here. 1972 was. Can you describe the?
Well, we're still talking about theory in 1972. Veith Risak described a self-reproducing program that could do minimal information exchange. And he went a little beyond what von Neumann did. It wasn't just a theory saying one day this might happen, but he actually laid out in assembly language the theory of how you would program a program that could replicate itself.
Okay. Oh, by the way, I have that phone number if you want to call us right now. We're between 8 and 9 Central Time on Friday, June 1st. The number is 414-935-2951. That number again is 414-935-2951. Please give us a call and add to the conversation. And if you have any virus questions, that'd be nice.
For sure. So the first, I wouldn't call it an in the wild virus. An in the wild virus is a virus that in the public has the ability to contract. But the first network virus was written by Bob Thomas in 1971. And this was a practical joke. He wrote a program as a practical joke that he uploaded to ARPANET, which was like a military network used for self-defense. And it was called the Creeper virus. And all it did was propagate through certain Unix systems, certain Unix servers, and it would display a poem. And he did this as a practical joke, working on the ARPANET.
Those military people are such practical jokers. Oh, wow.
And the military, actually, the first military-ridden virus, which was the precursor to cyber warfare, they wrote the Reaper virus. And all the Reaper virus did was remove Creeper, which was kind of like this stabbing pain in the side of these scientists for years. So the military wrote Reaper to basically remove Creeper from ARPANET. Yeah.
Nice.
Then in 1980, about a decade later, that's where we get the term virus. Jürgen Kraus was doing a lecture series. No, not a lecture series. He was writing his thesis, and he made the connection to these program automata and the way biological viruses operate. And then Fred Cohen, in 1984, an American, was reading Jürgen Kraus's work and popularized the name. Mm-hmm. And so in 1984, what we know of as a computer virus took hold.
It seems like a really apt analogy because, like, you think of a virus spreading in the wild, and then nature develops defenses against the virus, and just, it's very complex in the way there's a very detailed give and take between the way a virus survives and evolves, and but I've had lots of developments recently, which we'll get to later.
Yeah, well, when we talk about the different types of malware, then the analogy to what we already know is really important. A lot of people get confused because there's Trojan horses, there's worms, there's viruses. So everybody just says, forget that, we're going to call everything computer viruses. But actually recognizing the names is really important to your personal defense against a virus. Because with a virus, it's attaching to something that pre-exists. Whereas a Trojan horse, it's sneaking in as something you want, and it's not something you want. Mm-hmm. And so knowing the names will actually help you recognize something and be better prepared. But, that's something that we're going to talk about later in the show. Right now, we're trying to get an idea for how viruses evolved, how it went from being an idea to something that we're dealing with every day. So in 1984, the whole idea of computer virus took hold. Like it entered into the American public's mindset the idea of a virus in a computer. A few years prior, we started seeing the first floppy disk viruses. And those aren't as prevalent today. Viruses like Elk Cloner that became popular in 1981, what those did is they wrote themselves to bootable sectors, to removable media. These are the type of viruses that you'll still see today when you plug in a USB that is infected. They're copying themselves to physical hardware. And so if you're familiar with formatting, it's always good to format your USB every once in a while, especially if you're plugging it into a computer that's infected, because that's something that came from this Elk Cloner in 1981, which was the idea of copying information through physical media. But the big explosion in viruses came in the mid-1990s. In the mid-1990s, two major things happened at the same time. The American public started getting on the internet. We saw internet usage just explode. And we also saw the explosion of a product that we all use and love, Microsoft Office. And Microsoft Office employed a macroing system, which anybody that works in business or they work in science, they understand the power of macros in a Microsoft Office document. It's programmable scripts that you can insert into a static document. And so the combination of the internet and Microsoft employing the macro system into the Office suite just created this explosion of viruses because it was really easy to write something that could replicate itself. And so we saw for the first time viruses were more reliant on latching themselves onto specific documents instead of pure execution. And then, so those were the prominent viruses until about 2002, where we started seeing the advent of the cross-site scripting virus.
Cross-site. This is internet spread? Is that what it is?
Yeah. That's where you go to a website, and the website attacks vulnerabilities in your web browser.
We didn't have these until 2002?
That was the first time like Kaspersky and Norton started reporting that cross-scripting viruses were a major issue.
Wow.
I mean, a lot of this issue is that we're dealing with things that are kind of like the seedy underbelly of the internet, you know? And so with anything seedy and underbelly-like, it's not really well documented, you know?
Oh, really?
Yeah. So cross-site scripting, I mean, in 2002 it became prominent. We started seeing a lot of people, these MySpace viruses, or Yahoo personal pages was another one that was just rife with these viruses where you would go to somebody's website and they would use vulnerabilities in your web browser to gain escalated privileges on your desktop. So that they were crossing the bridge between the internet and your computer.
This is what likely took down Betsy's computer. And I guess that's not true. I mean, the viruses you can have from any of these sources.
Yeah, well, Betsy's scenario with the email attachment's actually kind of interesting because then we start getting into how do we define a virus, because she suffered from a mailer, from a spam adware virus. But the technique that it used was kind of Trojan horse-esque because her brother's computer got infected.
Mm-hmm.
And then the virus on her brother's computer went through his mail contact list.
Yeah.
And really intelligent mailer viruses, spammer viruses, will emulate previous emails.
Yeah. That's I had one of those years ago, and it ruined some friendships because my computer got infected, and it started sending these emails to my friends, and they were like, this is some nasty stuff here. I don't want to deal with you anymore. And I tried to explain to them that it was a virus, but to no avail. But yeah, so these things are really destructive, and I mean, nothing is more frustrating than just trying to use your computer and then, oh, hey, somebody messed with it for, you know, whatever reason.
For sure.
Very frustrating.
So now that we kind of understand like how viruses have progressed, I mean, in a basic sense, as somebody that gets infected with the virus, there everybody kind of asks, well, why would somebody do this? You know, you're just trying to see photos of your brother, or you're just trying to connect with friends from a long time ago.
Yeah, what makes people do these kind of things? Some of them just seem kind of like rapscallions, and then there's people who have some sort of aim that they're trying to do. They're trying to they're like con men just using computers, and we have now we have spies are targeting whole countries, trying to either gain access or to do sabotage. So we see a very wide variety of techniques, motivations.
Yeah, originally a lot of the innovation came because it was computer scientists playing jokes. You know, they were writing these as pranks. And so when humor is your motivation, the complexity, the sophistication of the virus is very minimal. And then in the 90s...
But they were the original ones, so...
They were the original ones. They paved the way.
Now it's not such a laughing matter.
But in the mid-90s, we saw money. Money became the primary motivation for viruses. And still today, the majority of these viruses that are being created to facilitate stealing money, they're being developed by Russia. The most successful one has been something called the Rockfish Gang.
These are not state actors. These are people just trying to get some money. I've heard that there's like these villages in Romania where like it's just dirt poor and they've got nothing to do. My friend Richard was telling me about there was a Nova episode, and just that's where they get all this money. It's kind of like drug dealing.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like the one laptop per child thing, you heard about that, right?
The what?
There was these. They were giving out free laptops to children in poverty.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And they're in Nigeria. We all know about the Nigerian oil scams. These kids at 10 and 12 were being trained to write computer programs. Mm-hmm. And they were writing phishingware and spam bots before they were even in high school.
That's where the sort of first ones came from, right? Or Nigeria.
No, actually, the first Nigerian mailing scams were developed in Russia by the Rockfish Gang.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But these Nigerian kids, they were just trying to get money for their village. And so these gangsters basically came in there and said, hey, you guys got laptops. You know, it's really crazy. But the Rockfish Gang, they were really prevalent. Like these people were tied in with the mob in St. Petersburg. And the mob, under legitimate companies, had developed what they called bulletproof hosting, which allowed, when they were getting subpoenaed by international bodies, they were not releasing information of people that they were hosting with. And that was done through lobbying the Russian government to allow them to host certain companies' websites in an anonymous fashion. And so in 2005, half of all successful phishing attacks, like please change your bank account password, please give us your credit card information, half of all successful phishing attacks in the world were estimated to be done by this gang that called themselves the Rockfish Gang, which were a bunch of nerds that basically were being paid by the mob to steal money.
They were protected by bulletproof hosting in St. Petersburg. What is that?
Yeah, that was the Russian mob through channels of legitimate business had lobbied the Russian government to change their laws requiring certain information to be taken in from people that are hosting websites. And so people were able to host websites completely anonymously in Russia, which facilitated the mob to give resources to the Rockfish gang to develop these very advanced, very sophisticated phishing attacks. And I mean, they made hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars off this. 2005 was basically the pinnacle, not the pinnacle, the most prolific year in phishing attacks. That was when it was at its worst.
And next after this came the NSA, which was German, a small group of programmers. They crafted the phishing Trojans.
Yeah, the NSA was a very interesting group. They're a very small group of programmers.
What does NSA stand for?
You know, I don't know. You should look.
Okay.
Why don't you look that up while I describe this?
Sure.
What the NSA was basically a bunch of college dropouts who they were really hard to find. The German government knew about them for years, but these were transient kids. These were kids that were living out of vans, stealing people's internet, and they were creating these pieces of software that looked like things that you wanted. Like they created antivirus software that actually was a virus. So you would download this antivirus software. Actually, they would infect your computer, and the infection would say, buy this antivirus software to remove this virus. And you would buy the software, and all it would do was remove the program that they put on your computer in the first place. And so that type of Trojan attack, well, it's a hybrid between phishing, because they're, faking wanting your money, and the Trojan sneaking in as something that you want, but you don't really want it. And they were the first hacking organization, virus creating organization to develop that method. And so after they infected your computer, you would buy their antivirus software, which would remove the thing that they put on there in the first place. But then the way they got caught was they were turning around and they were selling your credit card information that you used to purchase their software. They were selling those to black market individuals. And so the German government was finally able to infiltrate the NSA and arrest them, simply because they got a little too greedy, and they were trying to not only sell you their Trojanware, but they were trying to sell your information at the same time.
Taking it both ways, I guess. Yeah, I'm not coming up with a good thing for NSA, unless it's National Security Agency.
No, I don't think our NSA.
So I guess I'll just move on from there. Let's see. Well, let's move on to cyber terrorism. That's kind of a big issue in the news these days with the Flame and the Stuxnet, which have been all over the news this week. But I guess this cyber terrorism has been going on for a while. I guess pretty much all the governments are doing it.
Well, it's growing exponentially now. Cyber terrorism and cyber warfare is becoming much, much more prevalent. It's becoming something that national governments are taking very seriously. I mean, Strategic Command has an entire division devoted to cyber warfare. Yes,
and we saw some alerts to this, some stories like a year ago. I guess there was a city in Brazil which got attacked, and they're shut off the power supplies for a while. So it's pretty scary stuff. I mean,
yeah, we saw, what was it, like 5 years ago, there was a group of cyber terrorists that actually committed a DOS attack against the entire country of Latvia.
Wow.
The entire country of Latvia could not log into any government website or bank website for 48 hours.
Yeah.
And it took the U.S. government 3 months to figure out who did it. Like, that was pretty crazy cyber terrorism.
And I guess cyber terrorism, I guess terrorism is kind of a loaded word. But espionage in general, there's different purposes. I guess China has been pretty active in this field of spying, and their motive, I'm told, is basically kind of like stealing ideas, or stealing patents, or figuring out how things work, so they can make those advances much quicker than they would on their own.
Industrial espionage.
Yes.
But the one thing that we've seen in the media where cyber terrorism has become something that you and I hear about on a daily basis is things like the Anonymous network. Like, you've heard of Anonymous, right?
Yes.
Anonymous isn't one individual, isn't even an organization. It's just like writing a poem and entitling it Anonymous, but it's become kind of like a call to arms for people that view themselves as cyber protesters.
Yeah.
Or how would you define that?
Well, they feel like they're under attack, and they feel that they have no other way to, because they don't want to invite attacks on themselves. I guess there was a big player in this was the Church of Scientology, which many members would become disillusioned with, and would leave, and they would have trouble speaking their mind because they would get all these threats, legal and otherwise, from the Church of Scientology.
Or sued, yeah. So, but how would you define them? Like, if the government is viewing them as cyber terrorists, how would you?
Well, that's an open question.
Not you as an individual. I
yeah.
mean, like the opposite side.
Yeah. Well, with WikiLeaks, we have these people are demonized, and they're also they're heroes to some. So it kind of depends on who you are, and how these viruses or computer related programs are going to be viewed.
Yeah, and WikiLeaks is actually an interesting thing to bring up, because when who's the guy from WikiLeaks?
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange. When the U.S. government attempted to extradite him, that was a call to arms from Anonymous, and they actually DOSed. They took down the FBI's website. That's how powerful these, what our government calls cyber terrorist attacks are. They completely debilitate the government's ability to operate on the internet. And Anonymous didn't just take down the FBI once over WikiLeaks. They took it down again over what was it, the FBI with Mega Upload? No, that was well, when .com got arrested, his last name actually was .com, got arrested, and they bashed down his mansion. Anonymous, in response to that, took down government websites. And their justification for it was, it was quite similar to what we had mentioned in week 2. Week 2, we were talking about patent law. And one of the comments that I made was that there was a lack of uniformity, where internet service providers, being multinational corporations, the Supreme Court ruled that they weren't liable for copyright infringement, but peer-to-peer providers were. That same argument was used by Anonymous to justify taking down government websites over the Mega Upload attack, because Mega Upload, all .com was doing was he created a website where people could upload large files, mega upload, large upload.
Oh, okay.
And there was a user agreement that his company was not liable for copyright infringement if his service was used to do that. But the government wasn't satisfied with the steps that he took to provide information to them. By government, I say actually the Australian government, because I believe the company was based in Australia. And so he was arrested off enabling copyright infringement. He himself never infringed any copyright. So that was a call to arms to the Anonymous network, or hackers that wanted to commit this terrorism under the name Anonymous.
Okay. I just want to touch on the Stuxnet and the Flame. We've got some other things coming up, and stay tuned for how to remove a computer virus, which I think we'll do next. But Stuxnet and Flame are some, I guess, unprecedented in their sophistication, and I guess they've been developed by the state of Israel, probably,
and the U.S.
probably with some U.S. help, or definitely with U.S. help, and they've been targeting Iran and other Middle Eastern foes, I guess. But what will the future hold for that? It's hard to say if they'll ever be turned against anybody else.
What is Stuxnet?
Stuxnet is a new piece of malware. I guess it's Flame is like it's a Stuxnet is a program that's designed to do surveillance, and also it's able to control these Siemens controllers, and do industrial damage, I guess, to centrifuges in Iran.
So, what is the purpose of developing something like Stuxnet?
Just to slow down your foes, I guess. They're trying to stop the nuclear program in Iran.
Oh, right.
Trying to slow them down any way they can, I guess.
So this is kind of like cyber warfare, then.
Definitely.
Wow. Right on. And so this changes the ball game.
It could. We don't know. I don't think we know too much about that. I certainly don't. But it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, nation states and militaries, they have much more resources than organized crime. And if we found anything with the internet, it's that once something's released in the wild, it grows exponentially. You lose control of it.
Yeah, and that remains to be seen. How I guess it's going to depend on how well this was designed, to see if they can control it like they want to. I guess we'll see.
For sure. And yeah, let's move on to the next section.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
what do you do if you figure out that you've been a victim of a virus?
Well,
computer.
First thing to do is to know what exactly a virus is, or what exactly malware is. There are many different types of malwares, and the name that a piece of malware has will kind of give you a clue of what you can expect. Trojan horses, as we discussed prior, they masquerade as something that you want on your computer. So they tend to be like antivirus, disk cleanup, Facebook covers. They seem like they have utility. And when you're installing programs and you start to see ads pop up, your computer gets sluggish, people are complaining about receiving emails that you don't want, and you realize that you've installed software on your computer shortly prior, then you were probably victim to a Trojan horse. There are viruses which they sneak onto files. So if you are getting email attachments as Word documents, zips, exes, those tend to be viruses. And so what we will do is it's kind of hard to explain how to scan viruses for email attachments in our segment. So on our Facebook page, facebook.com/RWTechQuest, we're going to post something tomorrow morning on how to scan email attachments for computer viruses, because it's really essential to do that, especially if your email attachments are exes, even docs, even zips.
Another good idea is to use a service like Yahoo Mail, because they check. They're pretty good about checking for viruses.
They're okay. Yeah, I wouldn't say there are some things that they have difficulty with.
Oh, okay.
So it's good to have another line of defense. But another thing you can do is, because Microsoft Office has this full-fledged macros, which allow you to do more things, it's nice to use something like OpenOffice or LibreOffice if you can, because those don't have as robust of features as Microsoft Office do. So those email attachments that are based in docs or exes, Excel spreadsheets or Word documents, by using OpenOffice and LibreOffice, you eliminate those types of viruses' ability to infect you.
If you're using Microsoft, a good piece of software is Microsoft Security Essentials, and I guess it's a very good program because it's constantly updated and it doesn't take up as many resources as some of the other commercially available programs do, and it's also free.
One of the reasons why I think that Microsoft Security Essentials has been able to progress so quickly in such a short amount of time is that they get the anonymous system reports from your computer when your computer crashes.
Oh, okay.
So Microsoft developing your operating system and your antivirus has an unprecedented communication change. And that has allowed them to identify viruses much more rapidly than, say, Norton or AVG or McAfee. And so I think Microsoft Security Essentials is going to continue to get really awesome really quick. It's rare that I recommend a Microsoft product because they tend to be more of a McDonald's style of software development.
Yeah, well, I think we personally would recommend ditching Windows for Linux. I'm sure we both feel that way. And can we go into the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, there are millions of viruses created for Windows. Millions. There are less than 1,000 for Linux. There are less than 10,000 for Mac. And honestly, it isn't because Linux or Windows or Mac have any more inherent level of security. Anything can be broken. It's a numbers game. And Microsoft Windows is used by 90% of desktops. The development tools for creating programs in Windows have been the industry standard for a much longer period of time. So the cost of development for these ambitious phishing people is much lower, and the return is much greater when creating viruses for Windows. it's much more expensive, and you get less of a return to create viruses for Mac, and much, much more expensive and much, much less of a return for Linux.
So what you're saying is we're never gonna be probably free of this problem of viruses. It's always gonna be with us because there's gonna be new ways of attacking our systems are gonna be constantly developed and new strategies.
Well, yeah, there's going to be a give and take because there are things like CloudBooks, which what that does is it's an internet laptop, and most of your computing is done on a server. Much like back in the day, we had those Unix stations where all the processing is done on the server, and even that isn't more inherently secure. It's just that your processing, your information, is on a system that's guarded by a well-educated system administrator. So that's why it's more secure.
Mm-hmm.
And so CloudBooks are probably going to be the most secure option you have, simply because you have
the professionals are taking care of the data.
But the give and take with that is then sometimes you want to own what you have on your computer.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of information that you don't want to be sitting on Google servers, or you don't want to be sitting on Apple servers. And so, we're always going to have that battle. But I don't foresee everybody moving to Linux in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So by moving to Linux today, you can take a deep breath and not have to worry about viruses, because very few people are creating viruses on Linux, and they're really easy to detect right now simply because of the economics behind it. Another thing to do is to understand phishing attacks, to understand the psychology behind a phishing attack. Phishing attacks are like when you get an email that says, like, your Nigerian long lost third cousin is coming into an inheritance, and if you just send him $100, he'll give you back 100 million.
Yeah, you want to avoid giving out your social security number, or credit card numbers at all. You need to be very vigilant about how you handle those kind of numbers.
There's no such thing as a free lunch. If somebody's offering you something for free, there's a reason why. And so when you're getting these emails, you have to be very cognizant, And that goes for stuff like downloading free music and free software. If it's free, there's probably a reason why it's free.
Not to get too paranoid, but right.
Well, I mean, right, there's open source, but the reason why open source is free is because it's part of a foundation in which, individuals have donated time to make the cost of operations cheaper for people. But I mean, back in the day, like when BearShare was big, they estimated that 33% of all BearShare users had computer viruses. That's pretty crazy, So you're better off using things like Pandora to listen to music, or Spotify to listen to music, and that's ad-supported radio. And ad-supported usually means it's not going to have viruses.
What is Kaspersky Live CD? I'm not familiar with that.
That's like when you get a virus.
Okay.
If you get a virus and you're like, I'm just going to download antivirus and remove this. If your system is badly infected enough, no matter what you do on that system, you're not going to remove it. So by using a live CD, it's a CD that has an operating system on it. And you boot off the live CD, and then you run the virus scan from the live CD. These live CDs have a much higher detection rate than built-in operating systems. So, I mean, I prefer preventive maintenance, using wise
That's always better.
strategies to prevent the virus in the first place. But if you're up the creek without a paddle, these live CDs are becoming the wave of the future. Dr. Webb has one, Kaspersky has one, AVG has one. You can download them for free from their website. Make sure you're getting it from Kaspersky.com or AVG.com, and that it's a secure website. You burn it to a CD, you boot off the CD, and it's much more likely to remove the virus.
Yeah, an interesting thing that I came across in the news this last week is what we had mentioned on a previous show about you need to be very careful if you're going to go on the internet and look for some porn. Because
we said adult websites, actually.
Well, okay. But you may also want to be careful if you're going to be using your computer for more spiritual stuff. I guess these days churches are becoming prime gateways for virus spreading online.
I would like to take this opportunity to personally apologize to every minister and religious person out there that I ever said, you know, like had the little elbow to elbow, like nudge, nudge, wink, wink, because what I was seeing was the results of viruses. And I was looking through cookies and browser history, and I was pretty sure that they were looking at adult websites. But this news story
that turns it all around. You
turns
know,
it all around.
You don't have to really be ashamed if you get a virus now, because you could just be like, I was visiting the I don't know,
my church's website.
Yeah.
So why are church websites more susceptible as a percentage to viruses than adult websites?
It's believed that there's less of a sophistication with these porn websites. Have been are old hands at this, and they're making money currently, so they have a motive to try and make you feel comfortable.
Oh wow! So actually, spiritual websites being more susceptible to viruses is actually kind of a good sign, because from what you're saying, it seems like the motivation of money is what gives pornography websites adult websites a higher level of security.
Yeah, well, sure. Well, we'll see how that plays out. It seems to be a constantly changing situation. What is this program, Malwarebytes? I'm not familiar with that one.
Malwarebytes. So, okay, there are antivirus software. There are real-time malware scanners. That's like Microsoft Security Essentials, AVG, and then there's junkware removers. And the difference is one is constantly scanning your system for viruses. If you have a real-time scanner, Microsoft Security Essentials, AVG, Norton, running at the same time as another, what that does is that file open handler, that constant scan, will conflict with said software, like another piece of software doing the same thing. So you should only have one antivirus software installed, which we recommend Microsoft Security Essentials, or AVG. Only one. However, you can still double your security by having a non-real-time scanner. And the best one out there is Malwarebytes. These non-real-time scanners, they take a long time. It takes 4 or 5, sometimes 8 hours to scan your system. But because they're not constantly looking at everything you open, you can run Microsoft Security Essentials and Malwarebytes. So like once a week, you have to physically open up Malwarebytes and say scan.
Oh, okay.
And that just gives you an added layer of security. And I found that Malwarebytes is really good for removing things like tracking cookies when you're going to websites and they want to track what you're doing. Or for like adware, like things that are giving you lots of advertisements. Malwarebytes is really good for removing those. So on my Windows systems, the two things I always install first are Microsoft Security Essentials and Malwarebytes.
Nice. Well, this has been a very informative hour. I hope all our listeners have enjoyed it.
For more information, you should check out a website called Calymania. It's CALYMANIA.com/panic.html. It's a great website for I have a virus, now what do I do? Basically everything we covered in this hour and then a lot more is on that website. And it's written for average users.
Nice.
And
All right.
also there's a Google News group out there. If you Google alt.comp.virus as one word, there's a discussion group specifically for people trying to remove viruses off their machines. And it's a great community.
Okay, next week we're going to be discussing political activism. Thanks very much for send us your feedback at rwtechquest.gmail. We'd love to hear from you.